Where is she? I can't see her.
He's not letting go. Somebody call 911, now.
It was supposed to be just another show at Blue Haven Marine Theater, a choreographed ballet between human and beast, a performance Isla Moreno had done hundreds of times before. This time, the water didn't sparkle with applause. It boiled with panic. In front of thousands of guests, including her own daughter, Isla disappeared beneath the surface, pulled into the deep by the very creature she loved most. It wasn't just a tragic mistake. It was a warning, ignored for months. It's not the first time, and if nothing changes, it won't be the last.
Before we dive in, I want to welcome you to the channel Wildlife Documentary, where we uncover the real, often hidden stories behind the world of marine entertainment. Today's story isn't fiction. It isn't exaggerated. What you're about to hear is a true event, a tragedy that unfolded in front of thousands of witnesses and left a permanent scar on an industry built on trust, performance, and dangerous illusions. So stay with me, because the story of Isla Moreno is one the world should never forget. From a very young age, Isla Moreno wasn't like the other children in her coastal hometown. While others built sandcastles and chased waves, Isla sat quietly on the rocky shore, eyes fixed on the horizon, mimicking the distant calls of whales. By the age of 10, she could identify the unique vocalizations of orcas, humpbacks, and belugas by ear alone. Her childhood notebooks, instead of doodles or diary entries, were filled with anatomical sketches and migration charts. For her, marine life wasn't just a curiosity, it was a calling. Statistically, less than 2% of marine biology graduates ever work directly with large marine mammals. Isla beat those odds before her 25th birthday. After earning a degree in marine behavioral science from the University of California, Davis, with a published thesis on emotional intelligence in captive cetaceans, Isla was offered a competitive position at Blue Haven Marine Theater, one of the largest and most profitable marine parks in the United States. It was a place of spectacle, known for its groundbreaking orca shows and controversial breeding program. For Isla, it was also the opportunity of a lifetime. Her colleagues would later describe her as the translator, not because she spoke multiple human languages, but because she seemed to understand the unspoken dialect of orcas. While many trainers relied on conditioned responses and clicker cues, Isla often used only body language and tone. Orcas that had refused to perform for months would re-engage within a week of working with her. One senior handler once said, "She didn't just train the whales, she listened to them, and they listened back." By her third year at Blue Haven, Isla had been promoted to senior orca handler. Her photograph was featured in brochures, online ads, and on massive posters outside the park's amphitheater. Families came to see the whales, but they often left talking about her. But Isla's story wasn't just about performance, it was deeply human. She had married James Beckett, a marine systems technician at the park, and together they had a daughter, Lena. By all accounts, Isla balanced her demanding career with a quiet, loving family life. She often told friends that everything she learned about trust, she learned from two beings, her daughter and her whales. Behind the scenes, however, Isla wasn't always comfortable with the park's priorities. She frequently advocated for longer rest periods between shows, more mental enrichment programs for the orcas, and greater transparency in medical reporting. Her efforts didn't always win her support from upper management, especially as ticket sales during peak seasons soared due to aggressive scheduling. Still, she remained, believing that her presence, her voice, might make a difference, even if only in small ways. According to internal park data from 2021, Blue Haven's Orca program brought in over $82 million in annual revenue. with Orca shows accounting for 58% of total ticket sales. Each whale, effectively, was valued more as an economic asset than as a living creature. Isla knew this, and yet every morning she still zipped up her wetsuit, tied back her hair, and stepped onto the stage, not for the cheers or the cameras, but for the trust she had built with the animals no one else truly seemed to see. But trust, as she would later prove, is a fragile thing, especially when one side is not free to leave. To the public, Blue Haven Marine Theater was a kingdom of wonder, an architectural marvel built along the Pacific coast, boasting panoramic glass pools, wave simulators, and amphitheaters that could seat over 8,000 spectators. The park's signature production, Majestic Giants, featured synchronized performances by orcas, lights choreographed to music, and trainers standing atop breaching whales. It was a spectacle that left audiences breathless. But behind the filtered glass and rehearsed smiles was an entirely different world. Internally, Blue Haven operated like a machine, a tightly calibrated system of show schedules, feeding protocols, and psychological conditioning. Each orca was assigned a detailed performance and behavior log, updated daily, monitored by middle management and veterinarians. Every splash, tail slap, or refusal to respond was charted, assessed, and scored. The show, quite literally, had to go on. According to financial records from Blue Haven's parent company, the Orca program contributed to more than 57% of the park's annual profit margin, with peak season revenues exceeding $200,000 per day. Maintaining that revenue meant one thing: consistency. And consistency demanded control. That pressure often fell on both ends of the tank. While Isla Moreno worked to bridge compassion and professionalism, not all decisions were in her hands. Ronan, the orca bull at the center of Majestic Giants, was a 23-foot, 11,000-pound apex predator, captured as a calf off the coast of Iceland and held in captivity for nearly 2 decades. His dorsal fin drooped permanently to the left, a condition known as flop fin, which, while not uncommon in captive males, has been linked to lack of space, restricted movement, and chronic stress. Ronan had performed over 2,100 shows since arriving at Blue Haven, but the 14 months leading up to the incident saw a marked shift in his behavior. Internal trainer reports, later leaked, described periods of listlessness, prolonged surface floating, and increased frequency of jaw popping, a known threat display among orcas. During the same period, his performance schedule had intensified by nearly 35%, with fewer rest days and multiple double show weekends. Isla had raised concerns about Ronan's condition several times during senior staff meetings, specifically advocating for changes in his routine and more time in the medical pool for enrichment. In one email, she wrote, "He's not a performer, he's a partner, and he's telling us something's wrong." Her warnings were acknowledged, but rarely acted on. Blue Haven's official training doctrine emphasized positive reinforcement, but trainers privately admitted to increasing reliance on food withholding and repetitive drills to secure behavior compliance. One junior staffer, speaking anonymously, later claimed, "If the whale didn't perform on cue, it didn't eat until the next session. We called it training, but sometimes it felt like punishment." Meanwhile, the audience saw only perfection. They applauded each breach and roll as a miracle of man-animal harmony. But Isla knew what it cost to maintain that illusion, and what it meant when living creatures were reduced to lines in a spreadsheet. The deeper she looked, the more one truth became impossible to ignore. The cracks in Blue Haven's system weren't just ethical, they were structural. and they were beginning to spread. For a creature as intelligent as an orca, communication is never accidental. Their language, an intricate system of clicks, whistles, and body cues, can relay everything from hunger to hierarchy, joy to danger. Isla Moreno knew this. She had spent years interpreting those subtleties, understanding that a flick of the tail or an unusual dive pattern often said more than any trainer cue could. That's what made Ronan's behavior in the weeks leading up to February 21st so disturbing. Beginning in early January, Isla and her fellow handlers began documenting a string of behavioral deviations in Ronan's daily routine. He stopped responding to tactile signals, floated motionless near the side of the tank for long stretches, and frequently jaw-popped, a gesture that in wild orca pods serves as a threat or assertion of dominance. On several occasions, he refused to participate in scheduled shows altogether, prompting last-minute routine changes to avoid public embarrassment. According to internal performance logs reviewed after the incident, Ronan's non-compliance rate in January alone had risen to 18.7%, more than double his historical average. In a field where even a 5% deviation is flagged for further observation, this was a red flag burning bright. But those flags were quickly filed away, marked as minor agitation, fatigue, or weather sensitivity. Behind the scenes, Isla's concerns grew. She submitted a formal incident report on January 26th, outlining 5 specific behavioral anomalies in Ronan's performance and recommending a temporary suspension from public shows. That memo never reached Blue Haven's executive review board. A mid-level supervisor marked it pending and, according to leaked communications, told another staffer, "She's overreacting. We can't afford to sideline our main draw this close to the spring break push." What the public didn't know, and what some within the park barely acknowledged, was that Ronan was likely experiencing chronic psychological distress. Captive orcas, particularly adult males, are known to suffer from captivity-induced hyperaggression syndrome, CIHAS, a term coined in a 2018 study by the Pacific Marine Behavior Institute. The condition is characterized by social withdrawal, unprovoked agitation, and in rare cases, violent outbursts. The same study noted that orcas housed in artificial pods, away from familial groups, were 3 times more likely to exhibit unpredictable behaviors. Ronan, who had been separated from other orcas after a dominance incident in 2020, had spent 19 of the previous 24 months in partial isolation. His enrichment activities had been scaled back due to staff shortages. His medical checkups had been reduced from bi-weekly to monthly, and his performance quota increased. In her personal logbook, Isla wrote, "It's like he's fading, like he's trying to tell us something and nobody's listening. Or worse, they're listening and choosing to ignore it." But Ronan wasn't silent. He was sending messages the only way he knew how. And with each missed cue, each ignored warning, the line between cooperation and collapse grew thinner. Soon, there would be no more chances to listen. Stay with us. Next is the moment the show turned into a nightmare. February 21st began like any other show day at Blue Haven Marine Theater. The sky over the coast was unusually clear for late winter, with temperatures hovering at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. By 10 o'clock a.m., more than 7,200 guests had filled the amphitheater's seats, many arriving early to secure a spot in the splash zone. Those coveted front rows where families could experience the thrill of the orcas up close. That day's show had been heavily promoted by the park as part of the seasonal Aguma Ocean Light Festival. The main attraction, a close contact routine performed by Isla Moreno and Ronan, Blue Haven's most iconic orca. It was billed as a moment of harmony between human and nature, a phrase printed on banners, brochures, and even commemorative merchandise. Backstage, however, trainers were uneasy. According to time-stamped logs, Ronan had shown signs of stress during the morning prep session. He refused 3 consecutive cues in the med pool, delayed surfacing after feed reinforcement, and remained stationary for over 7 minutes, far beyond his baseline behavior. Isla noted this, along with a short video recording of Ronan jaw-popping against the tank wall, and passed it to her supervisor with a quiet warning. He's off today. Not just tired, off. The show, nonetheless, proceeded. At 11:46 a.m., Isla walked onto the central stage platform in full wetsuit, her hair tied back and headset in place. From the audience, her daughter Lena clapped enthusiastically from the second row, seated beside Isla's husband James. A fellow trainer recalled, it was the first time her family had come to see her in months. She looked nervous, but proud. Ronan's initial breach was flawless. He arced out of the water, landing with a thunderous splash that soaked the first 4 rows. The crowd cheered. Isla smiled, gave her first signal, and stepped onto the submerged platform. But subtle things were off. Ronan hesitated before turning. His slide across the stage's edge came several seconds late. His tail slaps echoed louder than usual, sending irregular pressure ripples across the pool, a phenomenon trainers refer to as stress surfacing. At 11:58 a.m., the performance reached its most intimate moment, a side swim maneuver, where Isla and Ronan were meant to move face to face in synchronized motion. Isla extended her right arm, the signal cue, and waited. Ronan dipped beneath the surface, but instead of emerging beside her, he reappeared just inches away and lunged. Witnesses described a blur of motion and a sudden eruption of water. In one frame of security footage later reviewed, Ronan's jaw is visibly clamped around Isla's forearm as he yanks her into the pool. Several guests screamed, but many, at least initially, believed it was part of the act. It wasn't. What followed was 7 minutes of escalating horror. Ronan submerged, taking Isla with him. Emergency tones blared. Trainers on deck scrambled to deploy acoustic disruptors, while others activated the emergency gate system designed to isolate the tank. But Ronan refused to respond. He dove, turned, thrashed. The audience, once ecstatic, fell into stunned silence. At 12:03 p.m., the rescue divers arrived poolside, but could not enter. The policy was clear: no entry, while the orca remained aggressive. And beneath the surface, Isla had already been underwater too long. By 12:04 p.m., the pool's surface had fallen eerily still. The water, moments earlier, a churning blur of violence, now shimmered in an unnatural calm. Above it, trainers stood frozen, clinging to rescue poles and flotation nets. The acoustic disruptors had failed. The emergency gates had only partially closed. And Ronan, the 11,000-pound orca at the center of the chaos, hovered motionless near the middle of the tank, Isla Moreno still gripped loosely in his jaws. Protocol dictated that no diver could enter until the orca was deemed non-aggressive. But how do you measure aggression in a moment like that? At 12:08 p.m., Ronan finally released her. 2 rescue swimmers, tethered and suited, leapt into the tank. Within seconds, Isla's body was lifted onto the stage platform. She was unresponsive. Her wetsuit was torn at the midsection, with visible lacerations to her shoulder and upper torso. CPR began immediately. Compressions, rescue breaths, defibrillation. But Isla showed no signs of life. Her husband, James, had to be physically restrained by security as he tried to rush the stage. Nearby, their daughter Lena sobbed into the arms of a park employee. According to multiple eyewitnesses, the crowd remained largely silent, many too shocked to move, others openly weeping. At 12:23 p.m., Isla Moreno was pronounced dead on site by emergency paramedics. The cause of death would later be listed as drowning, following prolonged submersion. But the autopsy report revealed far more. Multiple rib fractures, a dislocated shoulder, hemorrhaging in both lungs, and deep tissue trauma, consistent with forceful thrashing. One medical examiner wrote, "Even without drowning, the internal injuries alone would have likely proven fatal." By mid-afternoon, Blue Haven Marine Theater went into full operational lockdown. All remaining shows were canceled. The amphitheater was cleared, roped off, and sealed for investigation. A brief statement was issued at 4:15 p.m. "We are heartbroken to confirm the passing of Isla Moreno, one of our most experienced and beloved trainers. We are cooperating fully with investigators and extend our deepest sympathies to her family, colleagues, and all who knew her." But behind that official calm, a storm was brewing. Within 24 hours, local journalists obtained leaked copies of Isla's internal reports, including her January 26th safety memo, which had warned of Ronan's instability. The memo had never been acted upon. Internal emails showed that concerns about Ronan's stress levels had been circulating for over 6 months, but were repeatedly minimized to protect ticket revenue during high traffic seasons. An incident report from late November, which described Ronan snapping at a junior trainer and refusing reinforcement food for 48 hours, had also been quietly archived, labeled non-critical. That report was never disclosed to Isla. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, launched a federal investigation within 48 hours of the attack. Animal behavior specialists were brought in to review surveillance footage, while veterinary experts conducted behavioral assessments of Ronan. Blue Haven's legal team braced for a cascade of lawsuits. But perhaps the most damning detail was the footage itself. In the final seconds before Isla was pulled underwater, high-resolution video showed her mouthing something, barely audible under the roar of the crowd. "He warned us." And in that instant, a tragedy once seen as unpredictable became something else entirely. Preventable. The death of Isla Moreno didn't end with the closing of Blue Haven's gates that evening. It sparked a national reckoning. Within 72 hours, over 1.8 million people had viewed amateur cell phone footage of the incident posted online. The hashtags #JusticeForIsla, #FreeRonan, and #ShutDownBlueHaven trended across social platforms. Former trainers, marine biologists, and whistleblowers began coming forward, some anonymously, others publicly, sharing disturbing accounts of ignored warnings, corner cutting, and institutional pressure to prioritize performance over safety. Outside Blue Haven's main entrance, mourners formed a growing vigil. Flowers, handwritten notes, stuffed animals, and posters bearing Isla's smiling face lined the gates. In the center stood a hand-painted sign. "She gave her life for them, and we let it happen." But the public didn't just grieve. They demanded change. Under increasing pressure, state and federal agencies intensified their investigations. The OSHA preliminary report, released 10 days after the incident, cited multiple violations of workplace safety protocols, including the failure to act on known behavioral red flags, the absence of proper contingency drills, and inadequate emergency gate reliability. 2 of the 3 gates had failed to fully engage during the attack. Simultaneously, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which oversees marine mammal exhibition licensing, launched a full review of Blue Haven's operational permits. Internal documentation obtained by investigators confirmed what many feared. Ronan had performed 39 shows in 45 days leading up to Isla's death, with no medically mandated rest despite evident signs of psychological distress. Meanwhile, Isla's family, devastated and overwhelmed, chose to redirect their grief into something enduring. With the support of colleagues and advocacy groups, they launched the Isla Moreno Foundation, dedicated to advancing marine mammal welfare, reforming trainer safety standards, and funding scholarships for young scientists committed to ethical marine biology. Public support surged. In its first 30 days, the foundation raised $2-3 million in donations. In response to growing public outrage, Blue Haven announced several reforms. All water entry performances with orcas were suspended indefinitely. Contact policies were rewritten from the ground up. Orca enrichment programs were expanded, and independent behavioral consultants, including some of Blue Haven's previous critics, were hired to advise on long-term welfare protocols. But many called the reforms too little, too late. A 2021 article in Marine Policy Journal compared Isla's death to the 2010 tragedy involving SeaWorld trainer Don Brancho, noting near-identical patterns: ignored warnings, overworked animals, and a culture of corporate silence. Both women were celebrated professionals. Both had voiced concern, and both paid the price. Yet amid the anger, a deeper question surfaced, one that transcended corporate negligence. Should orcas be held in captivity at all? Wild orcas travel up to 100 miles per day, form lifelong family bonds, and exhibit dialect-specific communication. In tanks, their world shrinks to concrete boundaries, artificial lighting, and regulated feedings. A 2020 review published in Applied Animal Behavior Science found that captive male orcas are 5 times more likely to develop abnormal repetitive behaviors, an indicator of mental distress, than those in the wild. In the silence following Isla's death, the glass walls of Blue Haven began to feel less like windows and more like cages. Her loss became more than a personal tragedy. It became a symbol of a system pushed beyond its moral limit. And as waves lapped quietly against the edge of Ronan's enclosure, no one watching could forget what was lost, or what had been ignored for far too long. Isla Moreno's death was not an isolated tragedy. It was the culmination of years of warnings dismissed, instincts ignored, and priorities misplaced. She believed in coexistence, in the silent bond between human and whale. But that trust was broken, not by the animal she loved, but by a system that refused to listen. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about captivity, about control, and about the thin line between spectacle and suffering. If we truly value these extraordinary beings, then honoring Isla's legacy means doing more than mourning. It means changing, because behind every glass wall is a voice struggling to be heard. And sometimes, that silence ends in screams. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share to help us keep telling the stories that matter.